I've reached that age where I sometimes catch myself using my cell phone camera as a magnifying glass, making the picture bigger so I can see. A lot of us go through vision problems like that, and they're tricky. They're tricky because you can't tell it's happening usually until something alerts you to it from outside. My grandmother had cataract surgery when I was little, and a lot of you have had the experience of having cataracts removed, and all of a sudden, wow, I can see. She said that it was actually, in some ways, a disappointing experience because when she came home, she realized just how dirty her house was. She had no idea. But that's how it is. You can't get out from behind your lens. If you have a cloudy lens, you can't see clearly. A lot of us deal with a cataract of sorts when we're trying to understand God. That's a pretty typical thing for us to have, and it makes sense. Being humans, trying to understand God. And a lot of us don't realize that the spiritual journey is mostly about seeing more clearly, removing those layers of cloudiness that stop us from seeing God as God really is. A lot of people will try to convince us that you can see clearly like that. You know, oh, I remember on the day that I was 14 and I could see clearly, and I've never turned back since. But that doesn't sound like most humans to me. I mean, if we're really honest about that, most of us are just seeing a little more clearly every day if we're working at it. In fact, I think that metaphor of being able to have the bandages taken off and seeing for the first time, I think that's really talking about heaven a lot more than earth. Our journey is about one layer at a time, clearing up what's cloudy just a little bit, one bit at a time. A lot of us have heard things about God from others that make us scratch our heads. For some people, it's been more than that. It's made them turn away completely. It might be something simple like you lose someone who you love that you can't bear to live without. And people, a little too quickly, a little too glibly, say, well, God must have needed another angel in heaven. And you find yourself thinking, why would God, who has everything, need to turn my loved one into an angel in heaven and take them away from me? That doesn't sound right. Or it might be that we're going through something really painful, really difficult, and someone just a little too quickly says, well, everything happens for a reason, you know. And we think, that might be true, but if this is somehow pleasing God, what I'm going through right now, I don't know if I want to worship a God like that. That's the real struggle, the real difficulty, the power of having a cloudy image of God. It can make us not want to be connected to God at all. That's why Lent is coming at a great time. The readings of Lent are about trying to move beyond that limited understanding of God. And that's why we're reading that book called Seriously, God? Which we have a free copy for you today. It's going to be our Lenten reading for this season. We've got one back there for you, or you could get it on Audible or download it from another listening app. But it's about that exact thing, about that realization that a lot of us have heard things, sometimes even from pulpits, that just didn't sound like that could possibly be God. And it's turned us off, or it's made our vision cloudier than it once was. You know, if we're honest with ourselves, one of the dynamics that goes on there is that we get tempted to fill in the blanks about God with stuff we make up. There's a lot of blanks about God being God. And so if we think of what Jesus has said about God, I mean, just last weekend alone, hearing Jesus say, judge not, and you won't be judged. Or forgive, and God will forgive you. Or a couple weeks before that, God shows love and mercy to everyone, the bad and the good alike. And we think, really? But my mom said that only good girls go to heaven. We've heard things that aren't exactly what Jesus said, and we're not sure how to put them together. And if we're honest, a lot of times, if it's something that grandma or grandpa or mom or dad said, and it contradicts Jesus, we're probably going to side with mom or dad, whether we know we do or not. Then that brings up another wrinkle to this, and that is the spiritual law that is very unpleasant to know, but it's true. And it's got a very easy axiom to remember it by. It's very quippy. It's, you spot it, you got it. Some of you might recognize that right away. If you spot something in someone else, you got it. Jesus says it the way we heard it today. If you see a speck in someone else's eye and it irritates you and you're finding yourself reaching to pull it out, be careful. It means you've got a plank in your own. You spot it, you got it. And maybe worse than they do. It feels when you first hear it like that can't possibly be true. But it is. In fact, the axiom goes on further. If you spot it, you got it. And then, if it makes you mad, you got it bad. I wish that weren't true. I always write my homilies in public so that they hit people where they're at. So I was at a coffee shop this week working on this very homily, and someone hit me with one of my pet peeves. It was a businessman at the counter ordering while talking on his cell phone in full volume. And I started right away thinking, he's so rude. What a selfish guy. Well, anyway, that passed. I let it go. Not too long later, a woman came in the middle of a call, opened the door, and her voice filled the place right away, where all these people were. And she had some kind of work thing. She goes, this has to go out today. End of story. And I quietly to myself, sitting at the table after she walked by, went, end of story. So then, about half an hour goes by, and all of a sudden a table of about 6 people sitting kitty corner from me, all of them all at once, jolt their heads in my direction. And I thought to myself, what are you looking at? And all of a sudden I realized I had gotten a call from my uncle's nursing home, and I was talking on the phone at my table at full volume. You spot it. You got it. It makes you mad. You got it bad. End of story. The truth is, we actually do this with God, too. Something we're dealing with, we project onto God. We assume that we can fill in the blanks on God with stuff we feel or we know. We assume that God is irritated by all the same people that we are. But that is a violation of you spot it, you got it. We're projecting onto God stuff that's our stuff. And it's funny that we think we can understand God. If you back up a bit, it really is funny that we assume we can, because everybody here was probably born sometime between 1930 and 2022. And God is the Alpha and the Omega, who's always existed and always will. And yet we assume that from our place, whenever we were born, in my case the 1970s, that I've got a really good perspective and I can take it all in and I've got a good sense. I can really tell you more about God. And of course, the fact that we were raised by people who probably, maybe, had a relationship with God, but had their own stuff going on, we might get that assumption that, well, my dad was strict, so God's probably strict. My mom had no patience with me, so God must have little patience. That's why this is coming at the perfect time, to use the readings of Lent and the teachings of Jesus and to go chapter by chapter through this book, which is about this exact thing. Seriously, God? Is this what you really are all about? It's going to be a chance for us to grow a little bit, week by week, peeling one layer at a time away of the cloudiness. Because if we're honest, we have to admit, we can't even begin to see more clearly until we first admit that our vision may not be quite as sharp as we thought it was.